Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sally Baudet.
And I'm Louisa Pilbeam. Our top stories. China's major industries bounce back as profit decline significantly narrows, a sign that government stimulus measures could be working.
India takes the lead in global IPOs with more listings than both the US and China.
Is artificial intelligence making us smarter? Looking back at a year that saw the incredible rise of AI.
And meet Harbin's new moose mascot, celebrating the magic of China's Ice City. China's big industries have seen their profits fall for a fourth straight month, but there's been a significant slowdown in the rate of decline, with some experts saying the trend is now firmly heading upwards. Growth was reported in several industries, including metal production, electricity and textiles. It's being seen as a sign the government's increased stimulus measures are working.
Industrial profit data is a key indicator of the financial health of factories, utilities and mines. In November, it was down at 7.3% compared with the previous year. But that was better than the 10% drop that was recorded in October, and a major bounce back from the 27.1% plunge in September. Let's get more on this with Chen Jiehe, Chief Investment Officer at Novem RK Technologies.
The profit of industrial, the whole industry of China is just one figure. I mean, if you look at companies' balance sheets and profits, the profit is just one part of that. The most important thing is that the balance sheet is still expanding. So if you have the profit dropping by like 5 or 10% for a company, that's not a big deal because the balance sheet, the net asset is still increasing. So that applies the same thing for China's industry. I mean, if you look into the history of this industrial profit annual growth rate, you can see that there has been a few drawbacks in its own history. You see this data sometimes fall into negative territory, but later on with the growing of the economy, it actually comes back.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a few bright spots, aren't there? There are notable growth areas, for example, electricity and heat production. They're around 13.5% growth, and textiles at 4.6% growth.
Yeah, definitely. You see all these kind of subsectors that are having the increasing with the profits, like the sectors that you have just mentioned. Also, some other sectors, for example, it might not belong to the industrial chain, but look at other parts of the Chinese economy. The port companies are actually growing. The trading data of China increased about 7% this year. Also, if you look at telecommunication companies, they are increasing as well. And also, if you look at many things, especially the new energy vehicle, they got a very sharp rising with the selling of new energy vehicle, especially the electrical vehicle, these kind of things. Don't even mention the online consumption, which has been growing at about 10 or 11%, I think.
So what policies do you think will be introduced to stimulate China's industrial sector?
Well, to stimulate China's industrial sector, we have seen many policies given out. I mean, China's government is a very responsible government. They give out a huge amount of economic policy every year. I mean, if you read through the paper. I mean, for industries, for example, cutting the taxation for industrial companies, definitely one of them. The government also gives financial loans and subsidies to industries, especially those high-tech industries, which is very beneficial to China's economic growth in the future. Also, China has been trying to stimulate the property market as the price has been falling by about 3 or 4 years. So it's time to stabilize this market right now. So it's quite a lot of policies given to the property market. Also, China's introducing a lot of foreign investment.
So just finally then, the outlook for 2025, do you think it's a positive one in terms of industry and China's economy in general?
Yes, I think that will be a year better than this year, because when we look at the most important factor is the property sector, is that it's starting to stabilize right now because of so many policies given by the government. It looks like the effect will at least continue into the first quarter or the first half of next year. And the growth rate of consumption is picking up. We also see the international trade is coming up as well. And the government, one of the very important things is that the government is setting out a huge plan to stimulate the economy next year.
Japan's Nippon Steel has delayed the deadline for its planned acquisition of US Steel to March 2025. The $15 billion purchase faces opposition from the powerful United Steelworkers Union and political leaders, including outgoing President Joe Biden and President-elect Trump. Our correspondent John Terrett joins us from New York. Hello, John. So give us the background to this and how it's got to the stage where the president has to make this call.
Well, what happened was US Steel is just an enormous company. It's not as big as it was in years gone by, but it's still very huge, based in the hard-scrabble state of Pennsylvania, which was key to this year's presidential election, you will remember. And Nippon Steel from Tokyo came along last year and said, we'd like to buy US Steel for $15 billion, and it's a cash and a debt and then a 40% premium on the stock price offer. But the trouble is, nobody wants it here. This is the issue. Now, the unions don't want it, and the presidents don't want it. Biden and Trump, they both said that they're not keen on the idea. Obviously, President Biden comes from Pennsylvania and is seen as a union guy. President Trump has said if he gets into office, when he gets into office, he will block the deal from going through. But of course, it's diplomatically sensitive, isn't it? Because the US looks very warmly upon Japan. It's a major ally in the region, so it's diplomatically very difficult. But the presidential election really highlighted the issue. It was really quite a big issue, particularly when we thought the election was going to be very, very close, which of course it turned out not to be. But when it was thought to be very close, the issues around Pennsylvania were absolutely key to the news coverage. Now, the background to this, what happened was a security panel, a very elite security panel, which is called CFIUS, which stands for the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, looked into whether or not this deal should be allowed to go through. But their only remit was on security grounds. They couldn't look at whether Nippon Steel was qualified in terms of financial backing to do the deal, or whether US Steel had another route. Nothing like that. It was only on security issues. And when they reported last week, they were completely deadlocked. It was just on Monday, I think. They were deadlocked. They couldn't come up with a deal, which is why President Biden now has to make the deal. He's got 14 days to do it, a bit less than that now, but we're expecting the decision to come quite soon. Now, he may well kick the can down the road and kick it on to the Trump administration. And if he does that, then we know probably what's going to happen, because Trump is likely to block it. But the news of the last 24 hours is that Nippon Steel has come out and said, OK, look, here's what we'll do. We'll extend our deal for this $15 billion deal from where it was, which was the third and fourth quarter of 2024. We'll extend our offer now right the way through till March, the first quarter of 2025. So that's today's news point. But I should leave you with this thought. I tell you, whatever happens in this story, behind the scenes at the administration level, they are thinking about China, because they are very, very concerned about what China is going to do with the steel market and the aluminum market, all that kind of stuff. They suspect that China is already and will in the future try to flood the world with cheap steel from China. So whatever the outcome of this deal involving the Japanese and the big US steel company based in Pennsylvania, the thinking into their decision will be laced around what China is doing.
Interesting. And John, tell us about India beating the United States and China with the number of initial public offerings it has listed this year.
I know, this is a bit confusing, this. I've gone over this and over this and over this with our producer to try and get this right, so I hope I do. If I don't sack me. Okay. Now, the thing about this story is that basically it's really funny, because last year when we did our year-end review in 2023, December last year, one of the guests in that said that he thought the IPO market in America would absolutely explode in 2024. And he got it wrong, and we all did. It just simply never materialized. There was only, I think, 10 high-tech companies in America that came to market in 2024. We were expecting far more than that. There were a handful of big names like Reddit, the San Francisco-based blog, and Astra Labs, which is a space company based in Minnesota, and Rubrik in Palo Alto, which is a cloud company. So nobody nobody has the first idea what they do, but they invest in them anyway. And I think the problem with IPOs here this year has been the election uncertainty. We just didn't know, did we, until we got the election result, and we still don't really know what's going to happen in 2025. However, it turns out now, according to the Financial Times and Deal Logic, that India has been creeping up on all of us. And in the last 11 months, this is the best way to put it is this, in the last 11 months, okay, India has led the United States and China in the number of IPOs. That's the number that actually came to market in India, and it is now the second largest IPO market in value, behind the United States, but well ahead of China. And I should say that's entirely in keeping with government policy in China. Okay, they have introduced rules and regulations which they wanted to put in place for various reasons, and the IPO market in China is down about 80%. But the companies that have come to market in India include names like Swiggy. I've never heard of Swiggy, but then I don't live in India, so why should I? Swiggy is a food ordering company. And Hyundai Motors, of course, they're out of the ROK, so they chose India over all the others. Yeah, the question is, can India sustain this? If there was some kind of major economic downturn there or around the world, would India be able to keep up with the United States and China catching up eventually? We simply don't know. But it is very interesting, I think, that the world's largest democracy, and I think the most populous country in the world, is now right up there as a leading player of bringing companies to the global stock markets.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. John Terrett coming to us live from New York.
China has announced an investigation into beef imports after domestic prices fell to a 5-year low. Chinese beef producers had lobbied for an inquiry, claiming rising imports over the last 5 years had seriously damaged the industry. China is the world's largest consumer of beef, with imports reaching $14.2 billion in 2023. Its main suppliers are Argentina, Brazil and Australia.
Japan's government has approved a record budget for 2025, which includes the country's highest ever defense spending. The $730 billion plan also includes measures aimed at supporting an aging population. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's minority government needs parliamentary approval for the spending plans by March.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, an acting president impeached, an ex-president investigated and a former defense minister indicted. The latest in South Korea's political saga.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back.
South Korea's parliament has voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo, plunging the country into further political turmoil. Impeachment can result in the permanent removal of a leader if found to have abused power and lead to severe criminal charges. Previous President Yoon Suk-yeol was impeached after he declared martial law earlier this month. South Korea's Constitutional Court has opened hearings on removing suspended Yoon from office, and prosecutors have indicted former Defence Minister Kim Yong-hyun for insurrection over his involvement in the martial law declaration.
Our correspondent Shane Hum has the latest on the political chaos in Seoul.
South Korean lawmakers have voted to impeach Prime Minister and acting President Han Duck-soo less than 2 weeks after impeaching President Yoon Suk-yeol over his role in declaring martial law earlier this month.
I declare that the impeachment motion of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo has passed with 192 votes out of 192 votes cast.
Opposition lawmakers spearheaded the impeachment motion, blaming Han's refusal to appoint 3 constitutional court justices and his involvement in President Yoon's martial law declaration.
The acting president has transformed into an acting authority of treason. The People Power Party, which produced the leader of treason, has abandoned its responsibility to uphold the Constitution and has instead positioned itself as a loyal guard for the leader of rebellion.
The ruling party strongly protested today's impeachment vote and says it will file an injunction against the results. In the meantime, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok now assumes the role of acting president and is tasked with stabilizing state affairs even as he inherits an economy facing strong headwinds. The South Korean won currency on Friday plunged to its lowest level since the global financial crisis in 2009 on news of Han's impeachment.
We sincerely hope that further political uncertainty, which threatens our economy and national security, will not be aggravated. Once again, we are calling for the cooperation of both ruling and opposition parties so the government can focus solely on the economy and public welfare.
Meanwhile, the Constitutional Court held its first pretrial hearing on Friday to deliberate the validity of the impeachment motion against President Yoon. Court justices are promising a swift trial, considering the gravity of the matter, with the next hearing scheduled for early next month. The president has vowed to fight allegations of insurrection and abuse of power in court.
Yoon Suk-yeol will attend the impeachment trial by himself and speak.
With President Yoon and Prime Minister Han now both suspended from their duties, South Korea finds itself in uncharted territory with an unprecedented leadership vacuum and all eyes on a court decision that could shape the nation's political landscape for years to come. Shane Hom, CGTN, Seoul.
I spoke with Dr. John Nilsson Wright, the head of the Japan and Korea's program at the University of Cambridge's Centre for Geopolitics.
The critical issue has been the former acting president, as he is now, having been impeached. Acting President Han refused to endorse the appointment of 3 additional members to the Constitutional Court. This was something that the opposition parties were saying was a necessary part of the process of concluding the impeachment of President Yoon. Their concern has been that if those 3 additional members were not appointed, then there was a risk that that impeachment vote would not, in fact, be upheld by the Constitutional Court. And their suspicion was that then acting President Han was acting in support of President Yoon in seeking to basically stall the appointment of those additional three Constitutional Court nominees. We are now in this difficult position of seeing power transfer yet again from acting President Han to acting President Choi. There is a big question mark over whether that impeachment vote of the acting president will be upheld by the Constitutional Court. So, frankly, we're in a period of more uncertainty and continuing conflict between the Conservative governing party and the opposition Democratic Party. And in all of this, we have to remember that the Korean public are watching this with a great deal of concern. Tomorrow there will be big demonstrations, I think, in the center of Seoul, continuing, I think, concern about what this means in terms of South Korea's economic position, we've seen a drop in the value of the won to a 15-year low. All of this, I think, is further confirmation that we have not seen the end to this major constitutional crisis.
Yes, a major crisis. And Dr. Nilsson, right, what does it actually mean to be impeached then? And what are the most serious consequences?
Well, for the acting president, former President Han, former Prime Minister Han, there's one, beyond the practical challenge of no longer being able to govern, no longer being able to lead the government, he has to step down. He himself is under suspicion. The opposition have argued that he may have been covertly sympathetic to President Yoon's own declaration of martial law, which of course sparked this crisis in the first instance. Former Prime Minister Han has denied that. There's a question mark over whether he himself will be investigated by the prosecutor's office on these allegations that he may have been sympathetic to the martial law declaration. As for the new acting president, President Choi, he's made it clear that he will try and govern and maintain stability. And to be fair to his outgoing predecessor, Mr. Han also said that he wanted to see that the current political turmoil should be dispelled, that there should be greater stability. All those, of course, are worthy declarations, but we saw, as your correspondent pointed out, in the immediate aftermath of that vote in the National Assembly, a large number of Conservative lawmakers surrounding the dais where the Speaker was convening that vote. It's a measure, I think, of just how much disagreement there are between the two sides of the political aisle in South Korea at the moment.
Yemen's Houthi rebel group says it fired a missile and drones at Tel Aviv overnight after Israel struck targets in Yemen.
6 people are reported to have died in Thursday's attacks on Yemen, which targeted ports, power plants and Sana'a International Airport. Ahab Al-Fandi reports.
Israel launched its 4th attack on Yemen, targeting civilian facilities at Sana'a International Airport, including the control tower, passenger terminal, and runway. The strikes also hit the Hiz's power station in Sana'a, vital infrastructure at Hodeidah port, the Ras Isa oil terminal, and the Kathib power plant, causing severe damage to Yemen's infrastructure.
I was present during the airstrikes. We were seeing off travellers heading to Jordan when we heard loud explosions inside the airport. My family and I, along with 2 other families, were there. I had to rush my children to the car. When we reached it, the car was damaged.
A press conference was held on the tarmac of Sana'a International Airport, where officials condemned the recent Israeli airstrikes, calling them a blatant violation of international humanitarian laws. They stated that the strikes disrupted public life in the capital and across Yemen. Despite this, airport authorities announced the resumption of operations, affirming their readiness to handle any potential Israeli escalation. In a new escalation, Ansarallah announced drone attacks targeting Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv and the cargo ship St. Ursula east of Socotra. They confirmed the targets were hit accurately. The attacks were in retaliation for Israeli airstrikes that followed a speech by the group's leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, who stated Israel was surprised by the scale of operations coming from Yemen. Observers say that Israel's escalation in violence shows how it's determined to continue the conflict throughout the region. Missiles fired by Yemen have evaded Tel Aviv's air defense system, hitting Israeli territory, and have also threatened U.S. interests across the region. Ihab Al-Fandi, CGTN, at Sana'a International Airport.
Let's get more now from our correspondent Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv.
An escalation, and no matter how much Israel tries to deter the Houthis, carrying another strike and another strike, the one on Thursday is said to be the largest one Israel carried in Yemen. It doesn't work because overnight, once again, at 3:30 a.m. local time, sirens surrounded all over central Israel, sending millions of people to the shelters, halting takeoffs and landings at Ben Gurion Airport for about 30 minutes, as is a standard procedure. And again, I think the Houthis have it very clear that they will most probably not be able to kill or injure, as the vast majority of these rockets and the drones are intercepted. But the effect is clearly there. The effect of sending it was, if I remember correctly, the fourth time in a very early hour of the morning, sending millions of people to the shelters. That effect is there. And also sending a message to Israel. You can attack us as much as you want. We will still able to retaliate. And the Israeli public is growing impatient as this is happening night after night after night. There's a demand to do something bigger, perhaps kill the Houthi leaders, perhaps some kind of another action. At least for the moment, it is not happening, and the Houthis are proving that they still have the ability to bother millions of Israelis night after night.
Yeah, and Jonathan, Israel's former foreign minister, the foreign minister has been speaking about Syria's new government. What more can you tell us?
Yes, so Gideon Saar spoke about the new Syrian regime, and the way he described it is the offensive of the smiles, meaning that the new regime is smiling to the world, especially to the Western world, portraying a moderate image, which is not exactly true. This term, the offensive of the smiles, was previously used for the Iranian regime at the times of the nuclear deal with the United States, with the Western powers, and it is meant to say that the regime is trying to portray a moderate face when it is not exactly that. Saar then went to say that the new regime is made up of jihadists who had control in Idlib, and then they moved on to have control in Damascus. But did their nature change? Absolutely not, says Gideon Saar. And there is a lot of criticism on Western powers which are now negotiating with the new regime. There's criticism on the United States, which took off al-Julani, the leader of the new Syrian regime, off the most wanted people's list. Israel is saying that eventually these are jihadists, these are extremists, and eventually they will also turn against Israel because that is their policy, that is their doctrine. Is this the pretext put on by the foreign minister for the fact that Israel is still in the buffer zone in Syria? Perhaps Israel said time and time again that for the time being it has no plans to retreat, to take its forces back from the buffer zone, from the Syrian summit of the Hermon, until Israel finds out that there's some responsible factor on the other side. This tweet by Gideon Saar, by the foreign minister, is perhaps a pretext showing that for the moment there's no responsible factor on the other side, and that is why, despite international criticism, even despite some clashes with locals, Israel has no plans to back up from the buffer zone.
The director of the Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza says up to 50 people, including 5 medical staff, have been killed in a series of Israeli airstrikes on a nearby building. Israeli troops have now evacuated the medical facility in the town of Beit Lahia, forcing out around 350 people, including patients and staff. It was one of the only remaining functioning hospitals in northern Gaza. The IDF says it has launched a new operation at the facility after identifying the presence of Hamas operatives in the area.
Azerbaijan Airlines says the preliminary cause of Wednesday's plane crash in Kazakhstan was external physical and technical interference, quote, and the investigation is ongoing. The passenger jet crashed in a ball of fire near the city of Aktau. It was en route from Azerbaijan's capital Baku to the Russian city of Grozny when it changed course. 38 people were killed and all 29 survivors were injured.
Germany's president has dissolved the lower house of parliament, paving the way for snap elections on February the 23rd. Frank-Walter Steinmeier called for a fair and transparent campaign, saying external influence was a danger to democracy. Chancellor Olaf Scholz lost a vote of confidence in Parliament earlier this month. He had been leading a minority government after the collapse of his three-way coalition in November.
As more than 60 million voters prepare to head to the polls in February, our correspondent Trent Murray takes a look at what to expect.
On the floor of the German parliament, Chancellor Olaf Scholz faced a confidence vote which he had called. After the collapse of his three-party coalition, a majority of MPs voted to call time on his government, thrusting the world's third-largest economy into snap elections. Scholz remained defiant in his desire to seek a second term.
We must do something to ensure that jobs are secured, that new jobs are created, that new economic growth is possible, and that we overcome the challenges facing our economy in the future so we remain a successful, strong, industrialised country.
But polls show he faces an uphill battle. His Social Democrat Party has consistently sat third in the polls. Conservative leader Friedrich Merz goes into the election the firm favourite, polls indicating his party currently ahead of Scholz's by roughly 15 points.
Scholz lost the trust of the majority of the population long ago. He's also lost the trust of investors who have been leaving Germany for several years now. There's also been a significant outflow of capital in Germany. The country's losing its competitiveness, and that is why we're countering this failed federal government with our own election programme.
But no party is expected to attract more than 50% of the vote. Coalitions and deal-making very much in the DNA of German politics. And just like the last government, the Green Party could prove critical in piecing together a coalition.
Das Wahlprogramm gewinnt seine Kraft.
Our electoral program draws its strength and power from its ability to tackle the problems of our time, the major problems of our time. And here, it must be said clearly, Germany must once again reinvent itself.
But the great unknown of this election is the role the far-right AfD could play. While many parties have ruled out working with them, they have consistently sat second in the polls. A spate of terror attacks thrusting their core message of cracking down on illegal immigration right at the centre of national debate.
Ich wiederhole es nochmal. Wir wollen.
I will repeat it once more. We want something to finally change in our country and for us to finally be able to live in safety again. We never want to grieve with a mother who has lost her son in such a senseless and brutal way ever again.
It's been noted here that these snap elections have been called at a time when Germany finds itself right in the middle of several foreign policy challenges, from the conflict in Ukraine to fears over a global trade war to an unpredictable president back in the White House. Whoever is victorious in February will likely face a very busy in-tray when it comes to foreign affairs. Surveys show the top issues for voters likely to dominate the campaign include immigration, a lagging economy and climate change. As Europe's biggest economy, the decision of Germany's voters matters to the broader continent, with results likely to reverberate across to Brussels and beyond. Trent Murray, CGTN, Berlin.
You can get highlights from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN's Storyboard email newsletter. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, will the machines take over? Artificial intelligence is getting smarter, but is it making us smarter too?
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover,
explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Sally Burdett and Louisa Pilbeam. The headlines once more. China's major industries bounce back as profit decline significantly narrows, a sign that government stimulus measures could be working.
And India takes the lead in global IPOs with more listings than both the US and China.
The robots haven't taken over the world just yet, but artificial intelligence is changing our lives. Our correspondent Michael Murillia has been charting the rise of the machines. Hello, Michael.
That's right, Sally. AI isn't simply the future. In many ways, it's the present. The technology made headlines across the globe in 2024, sparking both hope and, in some cases, concern. Let's take a look. Imagine you could double your knowledge in a single year. For humans, it's a fantasy, but for AI, it's a reality. Some AI models now process twice as much data as they did just 6 months ago. They can handle massive amounts of information, allowing them to learn faster than ever. ChatGPT-4, for example, was built on a huge database. Some reports suggest more than 1 trillion pieces of data. That's 1 followed by 12 zeros. Clearly, AI is getting smarter, and it's making us smarter as well. The scientists who won this year's Nobel Prize for Chemistry used AI, training it to predict millions of chemical reactions in our bodies. That discovery could pave the way for life-saving drugs and vaccines. AI is also changing the way we do business. Research firm McKinsey asked companies around the world if they used generative AI. In other words, AI that creates content. In 2023, 33% said yes. This year, it was 65%. But there's another side to this technology. You could say a dark side. AI can already do some tasks faster and cheaper than humans. Experts say it could soon perform 30% of jobs in advanced economies like the US and Britain. That doesn't mean all those jobs will disappear, but there could be a ripple effect, with many workers having to accept lower wages because it's easy to replace them. There are other risks. Fraudsters are using AI to create deepfakes, digital avatars that trick people by assuming someone else's identity. Meanwhile, the mother of a suicide victim has gone to court, claiming an AI chatbot encouraged her son to kill himself at the age of 14. governments around the world are now trying to manage the dangers. China, for example, has developed laws to stop the use of deepfakes. It's also drafting laws to regulate AI as a whole. Meanwhile, the European Union has launched the Artificial Intelligence Act, designed to protect human rights. It's not clear if all these regulations will work, but one thing is clear. AI is here to stay. Michael Marilia, CGTN, London. Well, Zane Verjee is an executive fellow at the Digital Data Design Institute at Harvard University, and she joins me now. Zane, thanks so much for your time. We've seen a massive spike in the use of AI this year, but let's talk about how we actually use it. How is that going to change over the next few years, Zane?
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I may be interacting with you, the avatar, at some point in the future. I think if I were to look at it into 2025 and beyond, I think the very first thing we need to be thinking about is AI agents. We are going to be creating so many different systems that can help us reason using agentic reasoning. Now, what does that all mean exactly? Okay, what it means is that rather than going to ChatGPT and giving them a prompt, write me an essay on African colonization, and it goes from start to finish, and boom, you've got an essay. What's going to happen is that your computer is actually going to be able to reason that answer and go, okay, what perspective are we going to tell this from? I will be able to access your database in real time. The AI agent can do complex tasks, break them down into subtasks, create more information and more tasks for itself to execute while you go off to the gym for 20 minutes or do something else. And you will get an excellent piece of work from that. So I think what that's going to mean is that systems are going to be more automated. Workflows are going to happen in ways that we've never seen before. And that every single sector, sales, marketing, media, PR, communications, finance, everything that we know today could be very transformed by agentic reasoning. And I think that's something that 2025 and beyond we need to focus on.
Really important point there, Zane. Now, the International Monetary Fund says AI could pose a risk for 30% of jobs in advanced economies. You mentioned workflows. The question, are we going to see mass job losses in some countries?
I think we're going to see mass job changes, Michael, and that's going to translate into losses. Yeah, sure. The thing about artificial intelligence and Gen AI is that it has been the great equalizer. If someone has like a couple of degrees from Ivy League universities on coding, for example, and I just graduated from high school and I don't know how to do that, well, both of us can now actively and effectively prompt AI and we would get the same result, right? So it's a great equalizer. So what's the differentiator? So we have to start thinking about things that we as humans can offer that is different. We have empathy, we have emotion, there's human connection, there's creativity, there's critical thinking. Some of the most talented people going forward and the skill sets that are going to be looked for are individuals who have expertise and talent in linguistics. Super creative people that can come up with things that machines cannot. I think the critical factor here is skilling up, not freaking out over 50% of jobs will be lost by 2030 and it'll all be automated. That's not the way to look at it. Skill yourself up. You know, look to learn something for 5 minutes a day. What I think we're looking at going forward is people that are generalists, not specialists. That, you know, that era of being a specialist and that one task, I can read the prompter really, really well, I can code really, really well. The technocrat, that's gone. If you know a little bit about a lot of things, you know how to do prompt engineering, and that's just a fancy word. It's linguistics, right? Don't be intimidated by that. If you know how to generate video from Sora or VO2 or Kling 1.6, right? I just watch YouTube, and that's where I learn. If you have an ability to understand a range of things, you're a generalist, and your skill set becomes way more desirable. One last thing, Michael, is that women should not be intimidated by technology and AI. And I see a lot of times that, there's a little bit of a psychological obstacle. And I want to say confidently and frankly that that should not be the case. A lot of data shows that less women use Gen AI than men. And it really is just about exposing yourself to different types of knowledge, unlearning, relearning, and the person that will succeed in the workplace is the one that demonstrates adaptability and a great human skill.
All right, Zane, Virgie, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your perspective on this particular issue. Sally, Louisa, it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. And students should use generative AI programs like ChatGPT, but teachers should know how to spot its abuse. That is the opinion of Portugal's Education Minister, Fernando Alexandre. He spoke to our correspondent, Lee Jinhua, at Lisbon's Web Summit last month and also talked about attracting more young people to this annual event.
A significant share of them will take a degree in tech sectors, and they will contribute to improve our innovation ecosystem, because what we want is for them to more and more think about how to translate knowledge into solutions for social problems and of course for economic problems. And when we do that, we improve our society and we make our economy more competitive.
And artificial intelligence is a prominent topic in the tech sector. Do you bring AI to the classrooms now?
Yes, ChatGPT is everywhere, so it's the most used tool in Portugal. Of course, there are others, and we know that AI is a general purpose technology, so it will affect all sectors, all dimensions of our life and our economy, and of course, Portugal is not only very committed in using AI to make our society a better society and our economy more competitive, but also to develop the conditions such that research in AI is then also in Portugal.
So ChatGPT is allowed to be used in classrooms by students and teachers now. In a lot of other countries, there are worries that ChatGPT probably would impact the students' ability of critical thinking.
Yes, you have to have critical thinking to use AI in general. So, of course, AI, one of the implications is that we will have to rethink what skills we should develop in the students, because as AI is a technology that will be a complement in some cases, in other cases it will be a substitute, we have to rethink what are the skills that we should develop in our children and in our students as a whole. And even for teachers and professors in universities, of course, they have to take that into account. Because I am a professor at a university, and of course, I know that my students are using AI, usually ChatGPT, and what we have to do is to have the strategies.
As a professor, you're not worried about plagiarism among your students?
Of course, any professor is worried about that.
But if they use ChatGPT extensively, it could be a problem.
There are strategies to circumvent that, even when they are using AI applications. That's the challenge.
You are really positive about the use and the utilization of AI. We know that EU has rolled out the first AI Act to regulate the development of the technology.
Because the European Union values a lot privacy. Okay, that's something that I think it's quite distinctive of the European Union. And so it's our culture, it's our values. And I think for the world it is important to look at Europe, because AI has a lot of potential. It can really be a tool to improve the working of our societies and the competitiveness of our economy, but we have to know how to use it, and there must be some rules about the way we use it, because AI is all about data, the use of data, and data comes from people, and so we have to have this balance between how to be a leading how to lead in AI development, but respecting the privacy of people because data from people have been very important to develop AI.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, a hot encounter. A NASA spacecraft flies through the sun's atmosphere and survives.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. Egypt says it has hosted a record number of tourists this year, despite ongoing conflicts in the region.
And for 2025, the North African country has set its sights on attracting more visitors from newer markets like India, Japan and China. Our correspondent Yasser Hakim reports.
With its extraordinary history and culture, Egypt has been a must-see destination for world travelers for many decades now. And despite a series of headwinds, including conflict and humanitarian crises on its borders, the North African country is continuing to set new records in tourism. This year, officials say they've hit a record 15.5 million arrivals.
We have to admit that we were affected. The forecast was 18 million tourists in 2024, so we could have done better, but it's still good amidst the turmoil. That's because of our extensive marketing campaigns worldwide, the roadshows and competitive prices we are offering. We also offer different destinations throughout the year like Luxor and Aswan in the winter, and Sharm el-Sheikh for the beaches and North Coast in the summer.
The government sees tourism as key to its economic future. It set a target of attracting 25 million tourists a year by 2028 and is working hard with industry players to ensure that happens. Officials and operators believe the country can tap into market it hasn't targeted before.
The traditional markets Egypt depends on are Russia, UK, Germany, Italy and France. Those 5 or 6 countries send bulks, millions of tourists every year. The newer markets we're working to increase their inflows are India, the Far East, China of course, and Japan.
But one sticking point was a lack of accommodation for all these visitors. This prompted officials to offer incentives and soft loans for investors to either build new hotels or expand existing ones with the aim to more than double the current capacity of about 225,000 rooms. And it has worked, as one well-known international hotel chain has announced it's tripling its number of hotels in Egypt to 40 in 2 years' time. Another issue of concern from some experts is transportation.
The golden saying goes, when there's transportation, there is a tourist. And we have to emphasize this strategy by merging the tourism and aviation ministries together. This will improve the performance and will enable us to create new transport links to the markets we need to ease the access to our tourists.
Looking forward, 2025 could be an even better year than its predecessor.
We're all optimistic after Trump said he will stop all wars in the region. If this happens, then definitely will bring stability and security and increase tourism inflows.
The government says it's focusing on tourism, a sector that contributes 6% of GDP, as it's a major source of hard currency for the state and it has a high ceiling for growth. What's more, it's also seen as crucial to many secondary industries which employ millions of people. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo, Egypt.
Something very different now, and there's an unlikely new sensation sweeping through China. A toy moose inspired by the historic deer park in the city of Harbin. The Harbin moose has captivated locals and visitors. Our correspondent Wang Xiying reveals all.
I got this cultural product toy from a friend in Harbin, with bean-shaped eyes, deer antlers, cotton-padded trousers, and a ushenka. I was really puzzled by its appearance.
Do you know what it is?
I took my questions to the designer to the Chu, who was busy running around. He said the answer could be found in 2 places.
This is the old railway bridge. Many don't know that Harbin is a city born from railways. Its strategic position on the Suiman and Chinese Eastern Railways helped Harbin become a northern gem. One inspiration for the doll, the reindeer, known as the ship of the forest sea, has also played a vital role in transportation, just like Harbin.
At my second stop, I was surprised to see a real reindeer.
Heilongjiang is home to 55 ethnic minority groups, like the Evenki, who once relied on reindeer for transport in harsh winters. Deer species have long been vital to this land. The doll, blending moose, elk, reindeer, and roe deer, highlights that Harbin has more than just Siberian tigers.
The Harbin moose, released this November, quickly became a hit with both tourists and shop staff.
This is probably the first local IP culture plush toy we've ever had. Its outfit features distinct northeastern Chinese elements. Since winter arrived, we've seen a surge in tourists, and both snacks and cultural products have been selling really well.
In London, there's Paddington Bear. In Japan, there's Kumamon. Harbin certainly deserves its own mascot. With the city's booming cultural tourism sector, the demand for cultural products is rising, and we need more locally inspired designs. The mascot should be cute, of course, but also a true reflection of Harbin. We hope it will help share the city's folklore, history, and unique charm.
Wang Xiying, CGTN, Harbin, Heilongjiang Province.
And finally, a NASA spacecraft has made history by surviving the closest ever approach to the Sun. Scientists received a signal from the Parker Solar Probe confirming it was safe after being out of communication for several days. It travelled to within 6.1 million kilometres of the solar surface. That's a small distance in astronomical terms, enduring temperatures of up to 1,000 degrees. Scientists hope it will provide a better understanding of the material and gases that surround the Sun.
We were saying we could do this in sun here in London.
Oh, yes.
So that is it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
More on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, and you can go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Coming up next on CGTN Africa Live. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of us here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.